Section 6, Final Assembly. Now it's time for you to put it together for real. Take a quick inventory of your parts and verify that every engine component is either new, reconditioned, or recently cleaned and inspected. Get everything together and prepare your shop supplies and workspace. By the end of this section, your engine will be ready for reinstallation in the chassis.
Let's start with a bare block sitting on the ground with the rear area facing up. Our Clevite rebuild kit came with all the oil gallery and freeze plugs included in it. We started with the rear oil gallery plugs. Any threaded plug should be coated with some type of sealer. We recommend using a liquid Teflon or a similar non-hardening sealer. Don't use a Teflon tape. Pieces can break off inside and cause an oil system clog. Clean the edges of the water jacket holes before you put the freeze plugs in. Then coat the inside diameter of the opening with a non-hardening sealer. Wipe it thin and even and don't leave any bare spots.
Grab a large socket that's just a bit smaller than the inside diameter of the freeze plug. Bang each of them in until they're just below the beveled edge of the water jacket opening. If you want, you can seal and smack in the cam plug, but we're going to wait till later to do ours. Now we turn the block over so that the front is facing up and get a punch that's smaller than the inner diameter of the front oil gallery plugs. Just a dab of sealer, evenly wiped around each of the plugs, and bang them in until you're about a 1/16 of an inch below the rim. When they're all in, you should take a chisel and stake the rim of each of the openings in at least 2 places. This will make some dents in the edge of the opening in the block that'll keep the plugs from backing out under oil pressure. This tool from Goodson does the install and the denting all in one step. Close off the 2 front water jacket plugs while you're here. Each block type is slightly different from another. Make sure you don't miss any engine plugs that are specific to your particular engine. Now let's flip the block upside down. This way it's easier to clean and seal the side water jacket holes. Check a few times as these go in. Sometimes they start to get crooked. If one does start to go in at an angle, you can just hit it on the crooked side and the plug will straighten out as it goes in. To finish off the water jacket, we'll put back the 2 drain plugs while the block is upside down. Don't forget to use some thread sealer. That's the worst of the banging that we're going to be doing to this block, so now we can put it back in a stand. On this block, there was a sneaky oil gallery plug that drops in on the oil filter side of the main cap. Almost every engine has some kind of hidden plug like that. Carefully read over your disassembly notes or look through your repair manual to make sure that you don't leave out any important details like that. Another example is all the different types of oil filter mounts and bypass valves. If your motor has a spring-loaded oil filter bypass valve, check to make sure that that valve is working and that it's closed properly. With the help of your notes, the block should be all buttoned up now. Your camshaft bearings should already be installed and ready to go. It's better to prep them with some assembly lube, but you can use oil if that's all you have. You don't need much, just make sure that it's spread evenly. Now grab your camshaft and do a final cleaning of all the journals in the lobes.
Moly lube, or Clevite assembly lubricant, should be spread all over the distributor drive gear and all of the lobes of a new camshaft. This is a messy job though, so we start with the gear and the first 4 lobes at the rear of the cam.
Spread some oil or assembly lube on the 2 rear journals and insert the cam in the block until we can leave it hanging on those 2 journals. This will leave the next 4 lobes of the cam easily accessible. Continue making sure each lobe is fully coated, a bit on the next journal, and carefully pass it in. This would be a really messy procedure if you had lube on all of the lobes of the cam. Wearing gloves is going to make cleaning up a lot easier too. When it comes to the last set of lobes, you can grab the front of the cam with one hand and reach inside the block like we did before and feed the cam carefully in for the last few inches. We left the cam plug out of our block just to ease these last few final inches. If you decided to install the cam plug already, or if you just prefer this method, put the upper gear on the cam and slide it in with both hands from the front of the block. Now your cam should be in for good, fully lubricated, and spinning smoothly. Before our main bearings go back in, let's clean the saddles of the block. Do the same for both sides of all the bearings to make sure there's no dust or buildup from the previous lubricant. The crank itself should be cleaned off as well. Install the main bearings and double check that the oil holes are lining up with the ones in the block. While you're at it, you should clean the caps and wipe and install the bearings for them as well.
When the motor starts up for the first time and while it's running, the crankshaft requires more lubrication than the camshaft. Clevite's engine assembly lubricant is great for the cam journals and lobes, but it was specifically designed to provide the startup and break-in protection that even their highest quality bearings deserve. Don't forget to wipe some on the faces of the thrust bearing as well.
So far, most of the final assembly procedures have been the same as you did them for the pre-assembly with regard to the engine bearings and various components. From here on, we're going to start thinking about permanently sealing up the rest of our assembly with the gaskets from our rebuild kit. Depending on your engine type, the first piece might be your rear main seal.
For those of you that have a two-piece rear main seal made of either neoprene rubber or the older rope style, click the two-piece button for your next procedure. For those of you that have crankshafts with a one-piece rear main seal, we'll be dealing with those types of seals later. Click on the Continue button to skip ahead a bit.
Engines with a two-piece rear seal need to have the upper half installed before the crankshaft can be lowered in place. For a neoprene rubber seal, the pointy lip will point towards the inside of the motor. When you press it in its place, use the plastic protector shim between the seal and the block to keep the rubber back of the seal from getting cut by the sharp edge of the block. For engines with a rope seal, you need to work the rope into the groove of the block and then use a large socket to tap it deeper into the groove. Then cut the excess flush with the block. Use a razor knife, but if finishing the cut gets tough, just clip it off with some cutting pliers. You can bolt the cap in upside down for some motors to install the rope seal in the rear cap. In either case, put a little oil or assembly lube on the lip or the rope so the seal won't burn out on startup.
For all types of engines, it's very important to put a dab of silicone sealer on each side of the seal where the rear cap meets the metal of the block. If you don't do this, oil is going to leak out of the rear of the block because there's no gasket here. You should also spread a little on the tips of the neoprene or rope seals as well. Now it's time for the final placement of your crankshaft. Of course, be really gentle as you lay it into place, and when it's set, lubricate each of the caps and then place them. From here on out, every bolt that goes in the engine is going to need to have some kind of lubricant or sealer on the threads. The main cap bolts should have some engine oil on the threads to reach the proper torque setting. For those of you with rubber rear main seals, remember to use the protector shim on the seal when you put it in the rear main cap as well. And of course, rubber or rope seals get a little bit of oil on the seal itself. The contact surface of the rear main cap needs to be clean in order to seal correctly against the silicone that's on the block. Before the main cap bolts can get torqued, they should also have some oil put on the cap where the head of the bolt is going to contact the cap. If you already put some under the head of the bolt when you did the threads, then that'll be fine.
You're going to need to have all the torque specs for your engine handy from here on. Check the engine spec section at boxwrench.net for all the most popular engine specs. If we don't have a listing for your engine, you should be able to find what you need in a repair manual.
For the final torquing on these main caps, we went in the 3 increments, just like we did in pre-assembly. This engine needed 65 total, so first was 20, then 40, then finished at 65. If you have 4 bolt mains, do the inner bolts first. Remember, don't torque whichever cap has the thrust bearing in it. When the other 4 are torqued, smack the back of the crank with a rubber mallet, or hammer against another hammer to seat the thrust bearings. Now you can go through the 3 increments to torque the cap with the thrust bearings. Now your crank is in for good.
If your motor has a one-piece rear main seal, you can click on the one-piece button for instructions. If you've already installed your two-piece setup, click the Continue button to jump ahead.